So, how does a U.S. Congresswoman see two of the hottest topics out there right now? Well, today we're going to break down Representative Claudia Tenney's take on Iran and voter ID laws, pulled right from a recent interview. Let's dive in. Okay, let's just start with this one. Wow. I mean, that's a really powerful claim, right? It pretty much frames the whole debate in black and white. You're either for election integrity or you want to cheat. This one sentence really sets the stage for the kind of intense arguments we're about to get into. All right, first up, let's talk foreign policy. The Congresswoman's main point here was all about the previous administration's tough stance on Iran. She called it a strategy of drawing a very clear red line. So what does that even mean, a very clear red line? Well, in this context, it's all about a policy of maximum pressure. The idea was to send a message to Iran that was just impossible to miss, spelling out exactly what the consequences would be for their actions. The goal, as she laid it out, was to leave zero room for misinterpretation. And according to the Congresswoman, this policy had some pretty dramatic results. Take a look. The claim is that it basically decimated Iran's nuclear program, left its economy in shambles, and really weakened its regional allies. You'll hear them called proxies. And on top of all that, it apparently even sparked protests inside Iran, with people rising up against their own government. Yeah, and this quote really just says it all, doesn't it? The whole argument is right there. If you believe the policy is working this well, then why on earth would you ease up and offer them a lifeline? Okay, so we're shifting gears now. From that hard line on foreign policy, we're going to pivot to a similar argument for a hard line on a major domestic issue. Yep, the conversation also dove right into the super controversial topic of voter ID laws here in the US. And this is pretty interesting. It's how the two sides of this debate were framed in the interview. So the pro-voter ID argument, that was presented as being super simple, totally fundamental, and something both parties should agree on. But the opponents, well, they were described as using, and this is a quote, ancient terminology, things like Jim Crow laws, to basically turn it into a partisan fight that, in her view, it just doesn't need to be. And to back up this argument for stricter laws, she brought up an international example. Apparently, she served as an election observer, and she pointed to Honduras. Check this out. Over there, their voting process requires not just an ID, but also proof of where you live and even biometrics. So that was held up as a kind of gold standard for secure voting. And really, this quote drills down to the absolute core of the argument. It's presented as this really straightforward, simple principle that everything else is built on. One citizen, one vote. Okay, so this whole debate isn't just some abstract idea, right? It's all centered on a very real piece of legislation that was actually voted on in the House. It's called the SAVE Act. So you're probably wondering, what is the SAVE Act actually supposed to do? Well, the interview gave a very, very direct answer to that. And here it is. The SAVE Act, at least according to the source, is all about taking that one citizen, one vote idea and making it law. It's a bill that would create federal rules designed specifically to stop non-citizens from voting in U.S. elections. And let me tell you, the feeling behind this bill was put in really strong terms. The argument was that passing the SAVE Act should be a total no-brainer for every single person in the House and the Senate. The suggestion here is that its purpose is so obvious, so fundamental, that it shouldn't even be a debate. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from foreign policy with Iran to elections right here at home. So what are the big takeaways? Let's just quickly recap the two main arguments we've unpacked. When you boil it all down, it's pretty straightforward. On Iran, the argument is for a red line policy of maximum pressure. And on elections, the argument is for stricter voter ID laws, like the SAVE Act, as just a common sense way to protect the integrity of the vote. And that kind of brings us to our final thought for today. When you hear these positions being argued, framing things as red lines or no-brainers, it really makes you think, doesn't it? It leaves us with this big question. In any political debate, how much is really about the nitty-gritty details of the policy, and how much is about the power of persuasion?